welcome back to EngageCast, a podcast about all things marketing. Today we are speaking with Avinash Ambati from Rehlat. Avinash is the product and growth head at Rehlat. He is the alumnus from IIM Indore. So Avinash, over to you. Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Your schooling and the teachings which you are still continuing at Rehlat about the product and growth.
Thanks, Ashna. Hi, everyone there. This is Avinash Ambati. I hail from Hyderabad. All my schooling was in Hyderabad, and I've done my BTech from JNTU University, and then went on to pursue my MBA from IIM Indore. And I've pursued my MBA as a fresher, so there was no corporate experience before that. So then I've done a stint in Delhi for about 3.5 years. That's where I've got the initial learnings about the product. So where I was handling a B2C mobile application, where it was more about experiment, make mistakes and learn. And then after 3.5 years there, I shifted to Hyderabad and joined Rehlat and started heading their mobile application thing. And now currently I take care of the entire product here, both the mobile desktop and as well the mobile, both the mobile browser and as well the mobile applications.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So, what is the major challenge that you're solving right now at Rehlat?
So Rehlat is a Middle Eastern travel company, which is focused for the Middle Eastern audiences, traveler. So there are two major problems. Firstly, the entire Middle Eastern travel market was dominated by offline agents until Rehlat started in 2015. There were not many global players also. The players were more of providing generic content. So Rehlat, when it started by my founder brother, he wanted to customize and localize the product for the Middle Eastern traveler. So we started the first Arabic version of the of an OTA in the Middle East, and our headquarters is in Kuwait. So entire localization team and everybody sits in Kuwait and Egypt offices, and also the entire ecosystem is completely customized for the Arabic audience and as well as the Middle Eastern customers. Be the payment ecosystem where we accept the local payments. For example, apart from MasterCard or Visa, there are other card providers, and banks directly give a different set of products. So the entire payment ecosystem, the marketing calendar is completely customized as per the calendar events of the Middle East geography. And the second major concern which we are trying to address is that there is a Middle East is one of the largest holiday travel market. So from Middle East to the rest of the world, there is a huge holiday travel market, and none of the global players are providing any one-stop solution for any traveler, especially for the Middle Eastern traveler. For example, if you consider we consider there are 4 stages of the traveler journey. One is deciding their destination, where to go, and secondly, planning their entire itinerary, tentative itinerary, how many days of travel, where do they want to go first, what do they going to do, and third is the booking travel tickets. The final one is the in-destination activities like shopping, dining, day tours, etc. So most of the people even now are focused on the booking engine part, which is the third part of the travel journey. But so we at Rehlat are trying to stitch together all these elements, right from the dreaming about a destination, in destination to the in destination services. So we want to understand the local audience and focus in serving them and push to develop travel planning as an easy and enjoyable experience.
Wow, amazing. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Avinash. Earlier we were talking to a very great e-commerce player in Dubai. So, the insight which we gain from there is there's a basic like a divide between the people who usually shop offline and the people who shop online. So in India, where we are, the customers are a bit confident about sharing their data to the online providers. It's not difficult, but in the UAE and the Middle Eastern market, the gap is huge, right? So how are you solving for this thing?
Right. So when I started, I said that one major concern is about localizing and customizing the entire booking system
Mm-hmm.
for the Middle Eastern market. And you mentioned that the Middle Eastern market is not ready to share their data.
Mm-hmm.
So we have faced the challenges, and initially we were focused on solving the customer's problem. For example, if somebody is coming to our platform,
Mm-hmm.
it means that they are coming to book a service, for example, in our case, flight or a hotel or a cab. But they are not here to give their data on the face, for example, if we ask them. So what we had tried to understand is that the the Middle Eastern market, when we looked into and started working for them, we understood that they are about 5 to 6 years behind the Indian market.
Mm-hmm.
Although they have the technology and everything, but the behavior or the customer attributes which we have understood says that the journeys what they go through, the actions they take, says that they're not yet ready in terms of the high level digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason probably the e-commerce website you mentioned might have mentioned that people are
Mm-hmm.
not readily giving their data.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is that we try to gather the data in a smarter way or contextually. So we don't ask the user to sign up right away. So
Mm-hmm.
we would ask the user to sign up probably in a second session. In the first session, we would want the user to try our services first instead of directly asking for a sign up or a login activity.
Okay.
So that's one way we do that. And secondly, through the journeys also we can gather certain data.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the different types of SDKs we use, like Google Analytics SDK or Firebase SDK or Facebook SDK, captures user data at a aggregate level and gives us the demographics of the users. For example, we have this data saying that major part of our users are from 25 to 34 years segment. So this data is also useful in creating the right kind of communication to the end users.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to say is that capturing data in a smarter way would definitely work for a Middle Eastern market, because we already have the learnings from the Indian market, Indian
Mm-hmm.
OTAs, and in the past 1 decade. And now it is the time to apply those learnings in a smarter way
Mm-hmm.
for the Middle Eastern market.
So coming to the point where you mentioned that people can try out your services without actually signing up, how does that go?
So right from the beginning of our product development, we have made sure that the users are getting closer to their objectives at every part of their actions.
Mm-hmm.
If, for example, if we consider the onboarding flow,
Mm-hmm.
we don't expose all the services or all the kinds of features available in our app. We start with our 4 core services, which are flights, hotels, cabs, and destination exploration.
Mm-hmm.
So only these 4 are shown to the user on the face in the first session, so that we would let the user to experience the actual service and the booking flow first, instead of entering into the day 7 or day 8 kind of features. For example, we have a loyalty program with use of an internal wallet called Karam Points and Karam Rewards.
Mm-hmm.
This part is not yet needed for a new user. Probably this is good for a returning user. So in order to identify a returning user, probably a sign up is essential. So for in the initial sessions for a new user, we found that sign up is not necessary, but we can capture the email ID, and we can send push notifications even if the user is not a signed up user. So we would ask the notification permission with respect to mobile application contextually whenever the user reaches that stage in the booking flow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, can you please explain the product life cycle? You handle the mobile part of it, right? So, from the date you first introduced the mobile application uh, till today, so what's happening inside? How you develop the mobile application? How you manage the product team over there?
Sure. So I've handled specifically mobile applications for 2 years, 2.5 years. since the launch of the mobile applications actually. So what we understood from after the launch of mobile application is that even Middle Eastern market is slowly transforming towards mobile first landscape actually. So previously we had a lot of traffic from the website, and slowly it moved towards mobile, the mobile browser, and later now currently we are seeing a huge jump towards the mobile applications. One, I think the reason is majorly because the mobile applications were itself not available at that point of time, like 3 or 4 years before. Now they are adopting to it, and even now we are, even the audience are not what you highly technologically advanced in terms of using probably an AI kind of a feature or augmented reality kind of a feature. Even the technology, the user journeys are very simple. We wanted to keep the user journey simple because from in discussing with the taking the feedback or discussing with the local communities, we understood that the product flow should be very simple, and it should be very upfront and easy to navigate. So that's what they asked for. Yeah. So what, again, the other thing which we also noticed is the retention is far higher for mobile applications, and the retention to transactions ratio when we see with respect to a mobile web or a website and compared to a mobile application is far higher, like about 100% higher conversions are there per active user or per retail user. Yeah. So if you, for example, if you have 100,000 active users on MWeb and 100,000 active users on mobile application, we would see about 4 to 5% converting on a monthly basis for mobile apps, while only 2 to 3% conversion on MWeb. Although the traffic is much higher on MWeb still. So we are trying to capture as many users as possible to the mobile app vertical, from convert the mobile browser users to mobile app users. And coming to the product life cycle part, so once we notice that mobile apps are having all this kind of best metrics across these available platforms, what we thought is that we went back to our vision. Okay, we wanted to create a one-stop solution, right from the searching of destinations till the in destination, which I mentioned earlier. So we have applied those principles for the mobile app actually, where most of the features like Careem Cabs or explore destination stuff, you will not find it on mobile browser or the website, because we wanted to do the mobile app first. So currently we are at flights, hotels, explore destination, and cabs, which we are associated with Careem for the Middle Eastern geography, and soon we are launching across the world with the help of a service provider called Lit, where even a Middle Eastern traveler traveling to Europe can still now book cabs on our app. So what we want to do is that we want to become the one-stop solution for the traveler till the last mile. So we are thinking of integrating the trains in the coming future, Europe trains, which we will be partnering with Omio, and so what I'm if you consider the product life cycle per se, few features are in the version 1, few features are like in the version 7 or 8. So there are certain features which we still need to learn from the market, try to understand what they want. For example, all these certain features are trying out the hypothesis. We need to understand if the hypothesis is working or not.
Wow, amazing. So since you mentioned Careem Wallet, and you also mentioned that the adoption is not that great as compared to India. So how is the adoption related to the Careem Wallet? Do people trust these digital wallets in Middle Eastern countries?
Yeah. So it's Karam Wallet. Karam means to spread happiness in Arabic. So what we thought is it might be more connecting to them. So what we did was initially more of a copied strategy like Go Cash and Go Cash Plus, like Karam and Karam Plus, where Karam Cash or Karam Points has certain limitations in the application while they are paying. Karam Plus is 100% burn. But what we noticed is a lot of people are accruing a lot of Karam Cash, but they are not able to spend that much. So then we had to shift our strategy we had to think on our own terms, considering the local markets. What we understood is people here in the Middle Eastern market are actually spread across different nationalities. So the demographics of the people are diversely, spread across. For example, if you consider, if you pick UAE, almost 20%, only 20% of them are Emirati local people. The rest of the people are from the rest of the world. For example, 30% are from Southern Asian countries like India, Pakistan, Filipinos. 20% are from Europe. 20% from North America, North Africa, like Egypt, majorly, and rest of the world contributes to 20%. And not everybody is a price conscious customer here. For example, local Emirati people are more about experienced oriented. They need a better service, although at a higher cost. We can charge them a premium amount. So and Indian people and Filipinos, all these people are more price conscious, and their travel frequency is very less. So we had to come up with different strategies to target all these people. So as I mentioned, because of this diverse spread of these people, we can't really focus on Karam Wallet being only a discount-driven loyalty platform. Right. So what we have come up with is that we have come up with something called Karam Rewards, which actually rewards the customers. So depending on the segment they belong to. For example, a local Emirati person would get a luxury brand perfume or some kind of different reward. So, for example, a subscription to an Arabic Netflix, or for example, Stars Play is a very nice Arabic content provider there. So they get a premium subscription for this. And a price conscious customer might get a flat discount of 100% Karam burn for the next flight. And again, a premium customer might get a reward of a free online check-in service or a priority web check-in. And so the rewards itself, the entire loyalty platform is structured in such a way that we will consider these diverse groups and try to cater to each one of them, not just keep it as a flat discount driven or a offer driven loyalty program. So this is still in the nascent stages of this product launch. So we need to understand if this strategy works or not.
Right. So you are saying it's just not digital cash kind of setup, right? You
exactly.
have rewards also, you have loyalty points also. So how do you guys actually, I find it a bit confusing. Like how do you guys actually reward these customers based on their purchase?
Yeah, so whenever a user makes a purchase like flight or a hotel, they get cashbacks, and during festive seasons we credit their wallets with certain Karam points. So these Karam points can be exchanged or exhausted in exchange of some kind of a reward. So for example, a subscription of Stars Play could cost them 2000 AED worth of Karam points. So they would have accrued this across 3 or 4 different bookings previously. So they can burn this and they can get the subscription as a reward. So that's one way of rewarding them. Second is they can directly apply their Karam cash as a discount. They can convert their Karam to as a real money kind of a thing at an expense. For example, Karam 500 AED worth of Karam cash is equal to 50 AED worth of real money. So they can convert and they can start applying them in real time in bookings. So what's happening is that we are having two things actually. One is that the user is getting a reward. Secondly, in order to convert these points to real cash, everybody retains the application. So at one end, we are getting more retention, and secondly, they are also getting rewarded. So this way, it is actually working out for us.
Wow, amazing. So this Karam wallet is just for the mobile app, not for the web users, right?
It's for everybody, but the rewards program is only for the mobile app users.
Okay, very nice. So okay, so do you when you launch a feature on your mobile application, so do you do it for the entire set of users, or do you do it for a group of users, test it out with them, and then launch it for the entire set of users?
So there are multiple ways of doing this. One is the well-known A/B testing, where we release the feature to 20% or 30% of the users, user base altogether, without considering different attributes. That's one way, which any Play Store and App Store will easily can be handled easily.
Mm-hmm.
So the second way of doing it is that creating multiple segments
Mm-hmm.
and trying to display this additional new feature to only those particular users.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the UX of our app keeps changing for different segments of users.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if we think that this particular user is not price conscious,
Mm-hmm.
then we show additional add-ons like premium add-on services like priority web check-in, for example. Our teams would our operations team would sit and do their web check-in for them, and then they get the boarding pass in their email.
Mm-hmm.
So probably this kind of an add-on feature can be seen in a non-price conscious customer. But if the if there we have identified this particular person is from, for example, a Filipino nationality who only travel once in a year to their hometown, so we won't be displaying that kind of a service to them,
Mm-hmm.
at least in the initial stages.
Mm-hmm.
So after multiple sessions, what happens is that after multiple sessions, we try to understand what exactly the user is trying to do. Even the user is not a signed in user. For example, if a user is doing 10 searches but not booking the flight ticket, but the user is trying to tweak the date, trying to check the price, sort the prices. So with the user's behavior, the user would be tagged as under one particular segment and treated separately.
Right, right. So, what kind of role does customer feedback and research plays in this?
Oh yeah. So if you see, the entire focus of our product is, and our market is in the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
and our development center is in India, so it's sitting in Hyderabad. Only the sales team sits in Kuwait and the UAE offices. We have a localization office in Egypt, but the business team sits in Hyderabad. So what happened in the initial days is that we would release a product, and somehow the metrics say this is not getting adopted properly. So then we realized that probably market is needing something else, and we are sitting in a different market, and we are applying our biases and assumptions. So what we generally do is that we collect user feedback from multiple sources.
Mm-hmm.
One source is from the user session videos,
Mm-hmm.
videos and user journeys, where we track different types of data. But still, these user journeys and videos and all this stuff sometimes would reinforce our assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
which might not be true, because we have already worked a certain feature on certain assumptions. So the other way of collecting feedback is directly asking the customers. So whenever there is a successful booking and the user gets, for example, a decent amount of discount for their first booking or something, our operations team call the customer and try to take the feedback of the user, if it happens to be a new user to our platform altogether.
Right.
So the second part is calling the customers and trying to understand. But the point is, the customers don't remember what exactly they had done.
Right.
So they don't even probably understand that they had taken an add-on service, and it has increased their price by 2 kWd. So they might not even remember that. So sometimes we get a vague response or feedback from the customer saying that, okay, this app is fine, I got a nice discount, you guys are doing good. Or sometimes they're trash and saying that this is not good, your competitors are better. So we can't believe the customer's words directly.
Right.
So the third option, what we prefer, is that directly going to these markets and watch them make sessions in front of us. So sometimes we call people as kind of focus group discussions, where we pay them in Karam Plus, so that they might make a transaction in the future with us. And we take their 1 hour or half an hour of time, and then we say that, okay, you just use how you want to use. We just look at how these users are using our features or products. That is one way. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, most of the market is offline driven agents. So what happened was, few users initially used to have like 500 bookings in a month or 250 bookings in a month. So then we realized that these are not an actual normal user, a typical user, but these are actually agents who are trying to mock as a new user or a repeat user and try to get the benefits. So what we created was we created a B2B portal altogether, where they get a different types of pricing and different types of margins, different type of payment methods, where they can save money and we can also save money from our end.
Right.
So these B2B agents serve to be one of the very nice feedback agents, because one, they use our competitor apps, they use our competitor websites, they keep using the service every day. So they know the pricing, they know the availability on content. Sometimes what happens is we tend to get the feedback before even the launch by asking these B2B agents to work, because one, they belong to the local community, and they serve the local communities actually. So for example, if there are 50 people in a local community, and one person would be the online agent who would be booking their tickets. So this person is also a good feedback agent for us. Sometimes an airline might be opening good price for our competitor, but not us. So we although we have teams who would be monitoring the prices across our competitors, but then these B2B agents are the first one to come up with the price difference, and then we go and negotiate with the airlines to give better prices for us.
That's a tedious process.
Yeah.
Cool. So when I was researching about Rahlat, I came across a very nice feature called the price lock feature. Is it still in existence?
Yeah, it is still there. It's still there.
Yeah, I must say it's a very great feature, and I think everyone out there knows, like while booking the airline tickets, the price goes up as the time reduces, right? So what were the insights from this feature when you launched it, and how did it came into existence?
Right. So what we observed from the data we collected is that there are a lot of drop-offs across the funnel, majorly when the user gets to know the actual price of this booking. For example, if 5 steps are there in a flight booking process, the second step might be the stage at which the user discovers the pricing. So we observed a lot of drop-offs. And secondly, we also noticed that majority of our bookings comes with a lead time of less than 1 week. That is, they're searching today for their departure, which is less than 1 week. So, and what we did is we tried to understand the correlation between number of drops and the lead time. So what we understood is the larger the lead time, if they have more time to travel, there are a lot of drop-offs. So that means that there is a logical deduction. What we figured out is that, okay, people are sure about their tentative travel date, but they are not sure about their travel altogether. So that way, what we thought is probably if we can lock the price at that particular point, probably the user might pay a fee for locking the price, and also they end up booking probably, if not today, tomorrow or day after. So this was the core funda behind releasing this product. We have released this in the first week of February, and since then we have seen a growth of 2 to 3% of bookings from this. And a peculiar or a funny thing is that out of every 100 price lock adoptions where they're paying us, only 25% result in bookings. That means that there are large number of users who would want to lock the price and they're still unsure. So at one end, they are basically reducing their anxiety that they might not get, they might lose this fare tomorrow or day after. We are reducing that because the price getting locked. And secondly, we are also getting paid even if they are not booking. So it's kind of a win-win situation for us. And we still did not market it properly. Probably, I think it would work better if we go full swing with this kind of feature.
Yeah, sure. I think you guys should market it like at a very large scale, because there was only one article which actually covered the price lock feature, and it is awesome for the travelers also, the backpackers who book like a very long time in advance, right? So
Right.
one thing which I glean from this is, do you cap the time? Like, okay, this is the time in which you can actually lock the prices, but not before 2 or 3 weeks before your travel.
Yeah, so typically the price won't fluctuate in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, but the price would definitely fluctuate in if it is 2 to 3 days of lead time.
Hmm.
So generally we kept it at around 72 hours. So you can block the price at a max of 72 hours, and we keep changing that to 48 hours to 72 hours some days.
Okay.
Because we have to hold that particular price at that particular for that particular passenger.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go beyond that, probably it might lead to a loss for us
Mm-hmm.
altogether. So the idea is to make a win-win situation for the user and also for us. It's, for example, consider like an insurance thing
Mm-hmm.
happening. So 100 people contribute to the pool of money, and 2 or 3 people take the benefit out of it.
Right, right, right. True, true, true. So, who are your target audience? Who do you cater to exactly?
Yeah, so we cater to the Middle Eastern traveler who is traveling within Middle East and from Middle East to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what we have seen is that out of this fragmented or diversely fragmented market where the local Emirati people are very less and there are a lot of expats working here,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we differentiate based upon holiday traveler, business traveler, and home visiting traveler, an
Mm-hmm.
expat who is visiting their hometown for once or twice in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So based on the frequency, we target them. So the largely the markets, our target segment is the Middle East market altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Any person who is going out from Middle East is our target audience, and
Mm-hmm.
within them, our major focus, more profitable users are the holiday travelers.
Mm-hmm.
Second, the business travelers. The least profitable users are those people who are traveling from Middle East. These expats traveling to their hometown on a less frequency note, like once or twice in a year.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you also mentioned that you cater to the European audiences also.
European audience, when I said it's these people who are working, the expats who are working
Oh.
in the Middle Eastern segment, and we have also seen that there are a large number of holiday travelers, like the Middle Eastern native people, who would be traveling on a holiday to Europe markets,
Mm-hmm.
like on a holiday trip. So we wanted to cater these people the
Mm-hmm.
services would be needing in when they are traveling to Europe. For example, trains are the cheapest source of local travel from one country to another country in the European Union, and buses is also another travel. So that's the reason we are trying to integrate trains and buses for European nations. But for the people who are traveling from the Middle East to the European market.
So, please help us understand the type of customer segments on the Rehelat platform. Are there various profiles that exist on the basis of the attributes as well as behavior? Like there may be
Yes, yes, yes.
service seekers, there may be users who would require prioritized services, or the people who are just there to shop because of the loyalty programs.
Yeah, sure. So if you see the entire OTA ecosystem, if a person books an economy ticket on Air India, for example,
Mhm.
uh, if the user is coming from brand one or brand two or brand three, paying a different price across all these three, would be sitting in the same product altogether. So the seat in the airline will not change. So how we would be differentiated is through the service and the communication and the benefits we provide to the customers.
Mhm.
So keeping that in mind, what we do is we treat different segments of users differently based on their choices. So any user making their action would define them, into one particular segment. For example, a new user would be treated differently compared to a mobile app user would be treated differently compared to a website user. And we also consider acquisition sources. For example, a user who is coming from an USC campaign, if they have a higher ASP, average selling price, would be seeing a higher benefit or a higher discount compared to an acquisition source which acquires us low profitable users. So saying that, we segment the users based on various attributes like the source of acquisition, the language, the geography, what kind of service they are trying to use predominantly. Is it a flight or hotel or a cab? And which is he a signed in or a guest user? Are they using our Karam wallet points, or are they new to our platform altogether across browser and desktop and mobile? And what is the recency and frequency of their visits to us, and what kind of nationality they belong to? Because I've said it is very diverse, and what kind of destinations they are searching for. If you see, there are about one third of our bookings are within Middle East, and about one third for the rest of the world, and one third to these southern Asian countries like Pakistan, India, and Filipinos, which is so. If you consider about this Pakistan, India, and Filipinos, their frequency would be lesser. So based on these attributes, we create a different segment and target them with a different kind of promotions or different kind of services. And a holiday travel who is traveling to a European destination or a South America destination would be treated differently. So destination searched is also a very crucial parameter, because people search their destinations without even the need of signing up or something.
Right.
And we try to understand if this if a person makes a booking, if that booking is a business booking or a holiday booking or a home visit booking, if it is a solo traveling or they're traveling with family, and what is the lead time from the date of search to the date of departure. So all these attributes define the segments, and we use these segments in combination of where exactly they are dropping off to retarget them using our different marketing tools like Gauge, and try to increase our conversions.
Wow, amazing. So can you please paint a picture of a regular user journey of on your mobile application?
Yeah, sure. So any user who is coming onto the first our application will make sure that they reach their goal as quickly as possible. So every action leads to them to one step closer to the service which they have chosen for. So but then we need to make sure that all the marketing campaigns and all this which has brought the user from the entire world of internet to the app store, and then they've downloaded our app and they reached our application and they navigated till one of the service. So all the marketing activity which has put in all the efforts to reach till this point should not be left there itself. So we want to handle the user. So at every point of time we keep communicating to the user the best possible communication that can happen. That can be related to an offer, that can be related to an add-on service, that can be related to the kind of information they need to see. For example, if there is a layover in between two stops, do they need to carry a transit visa, or do they need to do a self check-in? Do they need to come out of the flight and then again take a different boarding pass? So all these entire alert systems and communications and discounts and offers, everything is communicated to the user. So the idea is not to make the user drop off at any particular stage in the funnel. Even if the user drops off, the data collected so far, we would use that data and try to create segments and retarget them.
Right.
And the good part is that the user is not taken when we are retargeting. They won't be landing on as a fresh session altogether. The session will be continued from exactly where they have left the journey. So this way, the users would be very happy, because they don't need to start the process again and again and again, and they can be focused because they don't need to explore or search for the best offers or discounts, because the place where exactly the coupon application is present, that is auto calculated and auto applied from our end. So we would run the best possible discount coupon available for that particular user, depending on if the user is the new user or a retained user, or the entire set of attributes which we have considered for that user segment. We figure out the best possible offer and we auto apply it, so that the user is not confused in the plethora of coupon codes and offers and discounts between bank cards or coupon codes or card offers. Because when we try to customize the experience, we end up making a lot of offers and coupons and attractive things which only confuses the user. And we try to make sure that the user, the first time user especially, who is not habituated to our ecosystem, should not get confused. Right. So we try to make sure that the entire communication is very fluid and which is helpful to the user, instead of giving them redundant offers, or which are not at all useful, or which are giving them a lower discount which the user will not feel useful. So
Right.
we try to make sure that the user is not dropped off, shown the right communication,
Mhm.
and retarget them if they drop off.
Right, right, right. So understanding the communication bit a little more. So how frequently do you communicate with the user? Let's say in number of times in a day, and through which mediums?
So when we started, like if you have asked this question a year ago, probably I would have said that okay, we communicated twice a day or thrice a day or one time a day. But now we don't send notifications or offer related things to the entire user base once or twice a day. So what we have done is we have noticed that the users are not just using one particular platform, they are using multiple platforms of the same brand, and they are using the competitor brands as well. They are price conscious, they are across everywhere. So what we thought is, at least we need to have some kind of a tool which helps us to target the same user if he is on a desktop browser or a mobile browser on the mobile application. That's the reason we have onboarded WebEngage. And WebEngage kind of a tool gives us the scope in order to create these journeys,
Right.
to create different types of communication mechanism for different segments of people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you consider a person who is dropping off at the third stage of a 5-stage funnel, so that particular, so each and every step within itself is a goal for us.
Right.
So each goal is considered as a step. And so how we generally target these users at different levels of drop-offs is that we capture the data till that particular point of time, and we try to make sure that which segment the user belongs to,
Right.
and then target them with the right kind of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And WebEngage, as I was mentioning, WebEngage gives us the probability to understand, to create these kind of journeys.
Right.
So I can't even now say that how many times a user would be targeted, but we put a maximum threshold of 2 or 3 notifications or communications across the different channels, like browser or desktop or mobile browser or mobile application.
Right.
So now probably a first time user might receive no notifications altogether if the user is directly coming and making a transaction. But
Right.
if the user drops off at a search stage, then he'll go into a search abundant stage.
Mm-hmm.
And if he is using the English version of the app, and he belongs to Kuwait geography, so he would be
Mm-hmm.
considered as in one particular domain. And if the user searched a particular European destination, so European destination English user who belongs to Kuwait abandoned at search will get a different communication compared to a Indian destination searched user who is using an Arabic version
Mm-hmm.
and belonging to a UAE geography. So different journeys are created for different types of users.
Right.
So a particular user at a daily level might
Mm-hmm.
get about 2 notifications at max because of the frequency capping. But I can't say what kind of notifications the user might get, because it all depends on what segment the user belongs to or what journey the user has happened to fall in.
Right. 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 Understood. Understood. So, what are the key differentiators of your product as compared to your regular competitors?
Yeah, there are multiple ways we try to differentiate ourselves, because if we want to create loyalty from the customer, we have to be very loyal, and we have to be being empathetic for the user. So we try to write down all kinds of anxieties a typical traveler might go through while doing a booking process.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if we consider the price lock feature, so we have
Right.
understood that the user might be more concerned about a fluctuating price. So we have
Mm-hmm.
created price lock. There's something called a cancellation protection. So all the non-refundable flights,
Mm-hmm.
they are protected under cancellation protection, and they will be given 80% of refunds. So
Okay.
certain eligible flights. So this is another anxiety a user might be facing, saying that, okay,
Right.
what if I booked the wrong flight, or my date of departure has shifted? So they'll get this. We assure that they get these 80% of the refunds without any questions asked. And so all our product features and everything is trying to understand the customer. And if you see, I don't think any other company is doing these kind of add-on services to the customers, at least in the Middle Eastern market.
Right.
And again, everybody is acting as a booking engine. Not everybody is trying to become they are trying to solve the expert destination kind of a feature where the user can learn about the next holiday destination. Or they can't. Nobody is working on anything like a itinerary planner, where for example, if there was a Google report which published in 2016 saying that a user might be making about 4,000 searches before planning their trip. That means that the user needs a lot of data and valuable, relevant data for the particular trip planning.
Right.
And also even Google is trying to do that with their My Trips feature. But the point is, Google is also a little bit fragmented when it comes to stitching all these kind of services together, because Google is essentially an ad company which will redirect to one of the OTAs like us. So we thought, why don't we try to understand and create this kind of a product which stitches together all these kind of services which the users really want.
Right.
And when we launched this Destination Explorer, which is the stage one of a trip planning feature, the stage two would be worked in the next quarter, where the user should be probably able to create a tentative itinerary, and with a click of a button, they should be able to make the flight and hotel bookings. So that's the vision of the product. Probably we'll start with something smaller and reach that level soon. So I think the entire vision of the company is not just to be as a booking engine, but solve the real time problems and reduce the anxieties of a real traveler, especially a Middle Eastern traveler, where the global brands are not focusing yet.
Right. So what has been your main channels of user acquisition as so far?
For the website, display and search engine marketing was the major one, Google AdWords. But with respect to mobile application, Google USC campaigns and MWeb as a channel of redirecting their traffic or hijacking MWeb's traffic to us, because we have about almost like 500,000 traffic coming only on MWeb, and we wanted to leverage on that. So we have figured out multiple ways of making sure after they make a transaction or a session on MWeb, they might end up making a mobile app download as well. That's the organic way of source which we are looking at. And Google USC campaigns are another source for mobile app transactions. And recently we have onboarded retargeting platforms like Vizori and Criteo. They are also performing very well to us, because while at one end the affiliate markets and Google USC campaigns are giving us new installs, and WebEngage is helping us in retargeting the users who are dropping off at different levels, and Criteo and Vizori kind of retargeting platforms are retargeting the users who have uninstalled the app or who might have got churned out across these social media platforms and other sources. So now we are currently trying to get more volume of new users, because our retention has increased to a respectable level as of now with the kind of product we have, the ecosystem we have. So now we want to increase the growth of the entire product in terms of getting the top of the funnel and also increasing the total number of conversions.
Right.
So we are trying to get the ROI out of each acquisition source. So we are trying to compare the lifetime values and the CPA costs across each acquisition source, and try to invest in these sources accordingly. So probably an affiliate network which might not give us the best quality of top funnel, we treat them separately. We use CPA kind of campaigns, while USC would be doing CPI kind of campaigns. So there's a different strategy altogether in acquiring new users. But majorly, Google USC campaign has given us more retained users, and these affiliate network users have given us more daily active users, so who are converting higher on a day 0 compared to your day 20 or day 30. but whereas Google USC campaigns gives us retained users who might as well make transactions, on a day 30 as well.
Right. Right. So you mentioned about diverting the MWeb users to your mobile applications and asking them to download your mobile app. So how many users you actually convert by using this technique?
We get about roughly 5% of new users from this source, from this channel. We feel that it is actually very quite low. Sometimes what happens is a user who is landing on MWeb via an ad might as well download our application.
Right.
So there was a lot of attribution confusion we had a while ago. Now we have integrated branch, and now we have proper attribution at place. And then we figured out that at least 5% of the new users coming are through MWeb sources. But we feel that's actually quite low, given that we get almost like 500,000 of new users on a monthly level to MWeb. I think we need to figure out more techniques. For example, currently there would be a smart banner available on the homepage of our mobile browser. And whenever a user successfully makes a booking, we ask them to, we say that, okay, now that you have booked successfully on mobile browser, why don't you keep the app handy so that your bookings and everything would be synced in, and you can get the trip alerts as well, because so we also provide this feature where we would be giving them alerts regarding their trips. So we don't leave the users right after the booking. We still hang on to them and provide them as long as we can help them by providing trip alerts, flight changes, schedule changes, or even in their if they are in airports, we try to give them any delays in the departures, and baggage belts, where exactly their luggage is dropped off after the landing in the destination. So we try to hook the users as long as possible.
Right. So how do you actually measure the CLTV, the customer lifetime value, and what are the methods that you use to predict the CLTV?
So customer lifetime value is something which we have we tried to do a year ago, which was a straightforward one, like how many transactions the users are making, and what is the profit margin we get, and minus the acquisition costs and discounts, and on a yearly level. So, for example, in a year, if a user makes 4 transactions, what is the profit margin we get from these 4 transactions, and minus the acquisition cost on an average per user, minus the discounts across these 4 transactions per year. So this is something which we look at an yearly level, because travel is that kind of a product where the customers might not make a transaction every day or once in 2 weeks. Probably on an average they make a transaction once in 6 weeks to 12 weeks. So this is something which we are looked in, but then we have realized that we got a lot of various types of margins and profits, where there are a lot of other parameters like refunds which we get, reissues, the performance linked bonuses from the airlines, hotels, and we have integrated a lot of add-on services. So now we are thinking to so what happened is a year ago we had a different version of our product, different types of add-on services. Now we have a better performing product, better add-on services. So in order to calculate the customer lifetime value now, we thought of integrating the future earnings as well, so that we can spend a little more in acquiring more better quality users, because the assumption is that after a year probably our product will be much more better than current product. So while we are calculating predicting the customer lifetime value of a user which we acquire today for the next 1 year, we should also consider that fact that our product will also be improving and our discounts will also be decreasing. Right. Because in the last 1 year, the discount per transaction has reduced from about $20 to about $5. Right. So even we are working trying to reduce the discounts further and increase our profit margins. So this gives us a scope to spend even more. So that's why we want to consider them, and we can consider more. We can get more value from a higher quality user. Right. So this is a basic way we look at the lifetime value now. So we are actually currently doing this activity now, trying to understand the future earnings and improvements
Right.
in product. How do we account them now so that we can predict a better lifetime value from the other users.
Right. And how frequently do you release the updates for the mobile application?
We generally have 2 week, sprints
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
We try to keep it as 2 to 3 weeks. Once in 2 to 3 weeks, we release our updates. Uh, Depending on the marketing requirements or a product release or a bug fix or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, we end up releasing one release per month.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Great. So you have already covered how you handle churn at Rehlat, right? So I just wanted to ask one thing. How do you actually reactivate the dormant users, the users who are idle, who are not performing any activities on the Rehlat app? So do you have any existing plan for them?
Yeah, so what we do is basically, as I mentioned, we collect a lot of data,
Mm-hmm.
which is on an aggregate level and on an individual level.
Mm-hmm.
And the individual level data is not more than email ID or the device IDs. So dormant user can be of two types. One is who have, for example, in the mobile app perspective, they retained the application but never opened the application in the past 30 days or
Right.
past few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And a few other users are who have completely uninstalled the app.
Mm-hmm.
So again, various tools, for example, WebEngage gives us the last action before uninstalling an app or before making an event, which gives us a fair idea that what exactly the user was trying to do, or was it a crash, or for example, if the user is unable to complete a complete an objective or a goal, is what exactly led that user to become a dormant user and a user who churned.
Right.
So we try to understand these factors, and typically, for example, if a user has uninstalled the application, we can't push notifications or in-app, we can't do in-app notifications or nothing like that. So we are only left with very limited set of communication channels like email,
Mm-hmm.
and the second set is that we try to retarget them using different tools like Criteo or Visori based on the email IDs they have provided to us, so we can retarget them. So even while retargeting them, what we do is that we try to create the segments again, try to understand different types of users. For example, if the user, if we understand that the tentative or an approximate reason for the user to uninstall the app is price related,
Mm-hmm.
we send an email or a retargeting ad. We try to display to them based on some kind of discount. If
Right.
for example, the user just after making a transaction, the user has no use of our application,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the reason the user has left our application or uninstalled the application, we try to send a price plus brand awareness kind of a email and an ad.
Right.
And if the user has left us because of a disappointment or a delay in the flight, or a transaction error or something like that, we try to increase the communicate them regarding a trust related factor, or we will also mention that our product has improved, there is a latest feature, so we try to connect with them with one or the other reason which might help them.
Right.
So and generally we try to get the feedback from the users as well. So send an email for all those users saying that, okay, if we have understood that about 100 users have uninstalled application today, right away we'll try to send the notification email actually, asking the feedback, what was the exact reason. Although the conversion rate is really less for that kind of emails, but still we get about 1% or 0.5% of responses,
Right.
which could be an indicator of what is the disappointment about why exactly they have uninstalled the app.
Mm-hmm.
So we send these emails and we display these ads across different social media networks. That's one way. Second way is try not to make sure the new users which we are acquiring go into a dormant state. So in order to do that, we are trying to improve the entire platform. For example,
Mm-hmm.
we are giving them enough reasons to retain our application. For
Right.
example, cabs is a feature which they can use on a day-to-day basis. Explore destination and trip planning, probably they can use once in a while to plan their trips.
Right.
And rewards is a platform which we will reward them if they retain and exchange their points, and they come again and again in order to check the latest rewards which are placed. So what we are doing is we are trying to pacify the user who went to a dormant state or a churn
Mm-hmm.
state, and trying to retain the existing users with a better product.
Mm-hmm.
So both at communication level and also at a product level, we are trying to improve, and there's a lot of scope to improve still.
Right. So, from our conversation, what I was able to glean is there are few channels of user engagement which you actually have at Railat. That is push notification, SMS, and emails. Are there any
Right.
other channels which you use to engage with the users?
The other channels are these re-engagement channels.
Hmm.
Once we get a lot of top of the funnel, installs or visits, and then there are drop-offs.
Right.
One way is using these push notifications and emails and in-app notifications to re-engage them. The other way is to re-engage them on different platforms, different websites or social media platforms where they frequently visit.
Right.
So Visori and Criteo and other affiliate networks who do
Mm-hmm.
retargeting, these are other people who are actually giving us good number of conversions recently. We
Mm-hmm.
haven't tried them last year at this point of time, but for the past 3-4 months, these retargeting channels are giving us tremendous results. And good part is that they are attributed properly. With a branch, we can attribute the source of install and the acquisition sources, and which again is fed to WebEngage, and we can create those kind of segments based on the acquisition source on WebEngage and create different types of journeys there. So the entire system is in such a way that we would be able to understand which source is giving us what kind of return, which source is engaging at a good level, what kind of users we are acquiring. So there is a lot of data which would be able to, the metrics actually, which will be giving some kind of understanding about what exactly we are acquiring and how exactly we are acquiring, what exactly these people are doing.
So, what could be the major reason for user churn at Relat? So, you have tons of features and tons of things to engage with the users, right? So, I'm just trying
Right.
to understand the major reason which you come across for the user churn.
Previously, when we were sending these notifications in bulk to different kinds of users based on only very few attributes, creating very few segments, uh, which only ended up in sending irrelevant notifications or irrelevant communication. So that was one reason where the retention was far lesser a year ago. So that was one reason. Even now, probably the wrong communication or a coupon code or something like that, which is not working for them due to some issue, or because now we try to make sure that everything works properly. But if there is a tech error or there is a crash, that definitely could be attributed to a churn. The other reason is that letting the user going into a dormant state. So one is after the user makes a booking and completes the destination, reaches the destination and enjoys the trip and come back to their hometown. There would We need to appreciate the fact that there would be a proper delay of X number of days, depending on the user type. If the user is a business traveler or a holiday traveler or visiting home, we previously never used to consider these kind of attributes and used to communicate them on a very regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Now we make sure that certain user segments, we don't touch them for 2 weeks or 3 weeks after they travel. So
Right.
making sure that we are not basically bombarding them with the communication, because although that could be a relevant or a very good offer to the user, but that's of no use to the user because the user has recently traveled and did not make any search for the future travel. So instead of focusing on asking showing bombarding them with a coupon code or a offer or a discount or a bank offer, what we do is that we would make sure that the user makes a search for the next trip,
Mm-hmm.
or the user is engaged in a different service.
Mm-hmm.
So previously we were not doing that, and these are the reasons where it led to churn, and these are the actions which we are taking now, where we don't bombard the users. We try to engage them with different services which can be used on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So the churn has reduced. but obviously every engaged user might not give us a flight booking or a hotel booking.
Right.
But at least we are making sure that they are not going into a dormant state,
Right.
and we are not bombarding them with a lot of communication.
Right. Right. And what has been the successful channel of engagement for you?
The successful channel, I think push notifications contribute us via web engage journeys, contribute about 10 to 12% of our daily transactions. Emails are about 2 to 3%, but the retargeting platforms which I mentioned through affiliates like Vizori and platforms like Riotio, they are giving very good re-engagement conversions actually.
Right.
About 15 to 20% of our daily transactions are attributed to these retargeting platforms.
Right. So understanding only on the product end of it, what are the key growth metrics that you actually measure?
So with respect to the product side, you mean, or the marketing side?
No, only to the product side.
The key metrics which we would be looking at is trying to understand how many people are crossing each funnel, each stage of the funnel at different levels, and are they using different types of features or not. For example, if we release a price lock kind of a feature, that's based on certain kind of hypothesis. So we try to make sure that is it working properly or not? How many unique users are using it? How many unique users have attributed to it? How many on a monthly level? How many users are making a search event? How many users are adopting a service? How many users who were initially flight users, how are they transformed into hotel users? These are some kind of metrics which we would be looking at a daily level with respect to the product side. With respect to the marketing side, then again, we will try to understand how are the marketing activities, the journeys and the campaigns running on web engage, on social media platforms, Google USC. So that's other level of metrics we would be looking at.
Right, right. True. So being the product guy, how do you ensure that the challenges faced by the product teams are understood completely by the marketing and the sales teams?
Yeah, right. So that's a good question actually, because marketing team needs the features or reasons to communicate to the user, and the reasons or the features which we want to develop would take time.
Right.
So what we do is that we come up with the entire product roadmap, keeping every stakeholder in the loop. So whenever we create a list of product features which needs to be developed for the next 2 months, or the next 1.5 months, what we ask is we ask each and every stakeholder from the marketing department, design, operations, and the support and development team sit together and ask them what exactly they want for the next couple of months. So then we list down all the requirements of these marketing team, and not just marketing team, every other team also. And then we try to quantify these needs in terms of revenue terms. For example, if we create this kind of a feature for you, or if we create a dashboard which shows these kind of reports for you, what additional impact would this bring to the table? So for example, if I say that a price lock kind of a feature will give $1,000 per day revenue on a daily basis, and if we create a report for you, or if we create a new landing page for mobile app promotion for marketing, and that gives us additional transactions of one transaction per day, which is like only $200 or $300 of additional revenue, and the margins are lesser. So we're trying to quantify all these needs and requirements in terms of revenue or some kind of metric which we want to see for that particular quarter or for that particular length of period, and try to communicate the same with them. For example, if these are the 10 things which 10 different departments would need, and probably we'll pick 5 because the bandwidth is there only for 5, and the highest impacting features will be worked upon. Because everybody were in the discussion, they will listen to it. But then all of a sudden, for example, the marketing calendar says that there is an festival season that is coming in, or there is a travel season that is coming in. like November, December, or May, June times where there is Ramadan happening. So that times we can't really do anything because as a brand we have to listen to the marketing team at least during these calendar events, because when we are saying that we are customizing the product or localizing the product, we have to listen to marketing team as well. We take their things on priority. For example, last year during the Ramadan time, we had done Karam days, where every day the users are engaged on a different level. For example, they play a game or they answer question, and they would be rewarded Karam points. This was exclusively a marketing related feature that we had to provide. So after the 30 days of Ramadan, they can convert their Karam points accrued across these 30 days into Karam plus points, which is equal to money, real money.
Right.
So and each user would be getting a different scratch card kind of a thing where they'll get to know their percentage of conversion from Karam points to Karam plus points.
Right.
So this was completely about a marketing engagement activity, and the product team has to work on it because the entire communication should be done, and then it has actually brought in a lot of traffic also. So although we couldn't quantify that because we have never done that kind of an activity earlier, so we couldn't quantify what would be the footfalls or what would be the conversion, how much burn, how much of money we would be spending in this conversion. So certain times we need to go along with the marketing team as well.
So what are Relat's future plans in terms of growth? Are you guys going to launch the same features for India also, or for other countries?
So our idea is to first become dominant player in the Middle East market. Currently, we are the top number one OTA in the Kuwait market. We want to become the market leaders even in UAE and SA, Saudi Arabia, and that is one way. And we are taking a mobile app first approach actually. So we would be investing hugely in acquiring the top of the funnel, and then working on different kind of add-on features where we get more margins, and completely bring the trip planning feature from version 1 to version 10 or version 5 in the next 3 to 4 years, and make Relat as one-stop solution. And we probably will not be launching Relat in India for sure, because the obvious reasons. There are already market leaders here, and the market is solidifying here and consolidating. So we want to be in Middle East and then expand within Middle East itself. So currently we are Kuwait, Saudi, and UAE. We want to become the market leaders there and then expand to Bahrain or Oman kind of countries within the Middle East.
Amazing. So that brings us to the close of the podcast. There is one fun segment which we have at EngageCast. That is rapid fire segment. We ask you a question and you answer whatever the first thing comes into your mind.
Sure, that's fun.
So let's start.
Sure, please.
Yeah. Top 3 digital products you can't live without.
Uber, Google search, and thirdly WhatsApp.
Okay, and the second question. So the last book which you have read.
It's the God's Debris.
God's Debris.
Yeah, it's the God's Debris. It's about the God actually.
Okay. The last toughest marketing product challenge which you have faced in your life.
Trying to come up with acquisition based customer lifetime value prediction.
Okay. Any suggestions for the upcoming marketers?
I think the old traditional ways of communicating to the users is almost expiring, and when the machine learning is a very nice tool to invest some time in, where I'm pretty sure that everybody would be collecting a lot of data, but if they can implement machine learning techniques, probably they'll get more insights out of it, which you can't do on an Excel or a SPSS kind of a tool. Because so that's what I want to say, that marketeers don't completely rely on the historic techniques. You might have to come up with new tactics and techniques and try to understand the local market, be data driven, Data-driven based marketing would always help and would always make sure that your ROI is huge, and it is the marketing dollar spent would always result in some kind of fruitful returns if it is a data-driven approach.
Right. Data driven, that's the word for the listeners out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last question of this podcast: if technology is taken away from you for a day, then how would you spend your day without the help of technology?
Probably I would sit under a tree reading a book,
Okay. Great. Great.
a real book, not a Kindle.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Avinash. Thank you for being such a nice guest, and we got a lot of insights from you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Ashna. Thanks, WebEngage and EngageCast for hosting me here. Thanks a
Thank
lot. This is the first experience, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I hope you liked it, and I hope you liked the questions which were asked on the podcast. We are always open to suggestions and feedbacks, even after the podcast.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Avinash. Thank you.